Good afternoon, LEC community. Welcome to another edition of LEC Live. My name is Edgar Palacios. I am the founder of the Latinx Education Collaborative. As you all know, or hopefully know at this point, we work on increasing the representation of Latinx education professionals in K-12. I am excited. It feels like it's been a while since we've done an LEC Live, but that's not the case. It was just last week. But I'm excited about our guest today, Graciela Berumen. Graciela, how are you doing?
I'm so excited. I was just thinking, I think we met 2 years ago and we've been talking about collaborating, and I'm so glad it's finally happening. So thank you.
I am too. I am so thrilled you made time for us today. For those of us that don't know you, although I think you have like a lot of friends, I think you're very well connected. So that may be a few people. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh my goodness, where do I start? I was thinking about that. Do they do beeps on this show? Can I beep? No, I'm kidding.
No, you don't have to, I think, subscribe to any FCC rules. So if you feel like cursing,
I'll try not to. But so my siblings and I were born in California. My parents came into this country in the trunk of a car. And I've learned to embrace that story because there has been times in my life where I was asked to not share that part of my story. And so, you know, we were talking about the power of stories and the power of representation. And so I really had to learn that maybe what some people saw as a negative in how my family and I ended up here is really positive, and it shows so much resilience. And it's probably something that one of my students needs to hear, right? That so many people like them, you know, are first generation college students. Their first language was Spanish, and that, yes, we can still be in spaces that were not created with us in mind, you know? So I got the tail end of English only as well as part of that journey. I was lucky that my parents were like, don't listen to the teachers. You know, they really instilled in us a love for our culture and our language that I then I'm trying to raise my children bilingual. Notice I said trying, because it gets harder as they get older.
Absolutely. They have to be a part of that conversation too. And if they don't want to uphold it, like it's a whole different challenge.
And this was coming from a language teacher. So I'm a Spanish teacher at heart. And it was easier when they were little because they didn't even know I spoke English when they were little, because we just talked Spanish at home like I did growing up. And then when they got older, they ended up going to a school where I worked, and they were like, oh my gosh, you speak English. So then it got harder to kind of reinforce that rule of Spanish only at home, especially because, you know, so many things happen in English and you want to share them. So we're working on it. They do speak it. They don't read it or write it, but I didn't either. So we actually moved to Mexico for part of my middle school and high school years because my dad wanted us to learn how to read and write and learn more about the culture. And it was like a switch turning on. It was the most amazing thing. Maybe because, you know, because of the language, Spanish, the letters sound the same. There's not all these weird combinations that like we do in English. So I always say I want to do that, but, you know, it really made me realize our parents are so brave. They just like pick up and move. Because think of it now, you know, just pick up, you know, that's probably the best thing for your children. You want them to embrace your culture and learn your language.
You know what, Graciela? I think we may be having some technical difficulties. Are you still there?
So yes, I'm still here.
Cool. Fair.
Yeah. So sorry about that. I didn't know it was your... where was I? Okay, so we moved to Mexico. We decided to come back because my father always wanted to go to college, but he never had the opportunity. They didn't have the money for that, but he always instilled in us, you know, to get an education and how important it was to have that piece of paper, right? That's going to open all the doors for us. So that's how we finally ended coming back to Topeka, for us to learn how to do that. And so when people talk about first-generation students, specifically first-generation families, and how, oh, they don't support their students. That's like the number one thing. I'm like, that is not true. So many parents want their students to get an education. They just don't know where to start because they were not part of the system. And, you know, think about it even now, working in it, so many things change all the time. And there's so many people you need to talk to for different things that that's kind of why I'm in my current position, and I love it. And so in hopes of helping others kind of navigate the academic journey better. Is that kind of?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm gonna quickly bring it to our community. Those who are watching us, thank you so much for joining us today. Robert Simmons, our good friend, who says no beeps, so feel free to.
I will try, Robert. I will try.
Unbeep yourself there. And then Delia, what's up? Good to see you. Clapping her hands in support of what you're talking about. Oh, here we go. You know what? I'm gonna bring her comment in too. It just happened. I struggle with that too, Mama. I'm a Spanish teacher, and our 5-year-old prefers English. We don't want him to dislike Spanish. We are hoping to continue to model all culture through the use of Spanish at home, listening to music, merengue, bachata, and eating Mexican, Puerto Rican, and Nicaragüense food. And if I can add, I'm not going to throw this out there, but if I can say this, Nicaragüense food is the best food. Just going to throw that out there.
I'll have to try it. I haven't tried it.
You haven't tried it?
No.
All right. Well, we're going to have to do a carne asada Nicaragüense style at some point. You know, we're going to do that in family once COVID-19 kind of like ends, if it ever ends. Well, your role is so important. One thing that I really appreciate about you is the energy and the passion in which you demonstrate. We talked about representation, obviously, right? So how passionate you are about the work, how excited you are to be in community with folks. And so I think that that's such an awesome gift for students who are navigating difficult situations and navigating a difficult college environment. I'm sorry, we just got offended for a second here. Delia said, Puerto Rican is better.
It sounds like a potluck to me. I think it turned into a potluck.
There it is. Tell us a little bit about your journey going into education. So you said you're a Spanish teacher at heart. Like what about teaching brought you into the field?
So the running joke for my life is I see a line and I get in it, and then I find out what the line is for. I kind of just stumbled on it. I remember it clearly. I'm walking down the hall in my high school and I see a guy standing there and I'm like, oh, what are you doing? And that's how I ended up going to Votech, which then they had a bridge program to go into the university. And it's just kind of been that along the way. So I don't know if it's because of COVID or what, but I have been reflecting a lot about my journey and how I got here. And it's really been the people along the way that have pushed me along. And surprisingly, the more I reflect, it has been a lot of women. It has been a lot of women that saw a potential in me before I even saw it in myself and said, you should really go for that. And so that has really made me think about the responsibility we have as educators, whether we want to embrace it or not. Our students are looking at us and we can make a difference every day on whether they continue going or they decide it's not for them. So, you know, when we talk about the highs and lows of our journey, you know, the people along the way that encouraged me are definitely the high. But, you know, we also have to warn our students that they might run into people that are not going to, they're going to tell them all the reasons why they should just stop, right? I think we've all had those experiences. I mean, I remember clearly, like, I got an F on a paper or something, and I was like, can I rewrite it? And they're like, don't even bother. You know, those people that kind of make you doubt yourself in a space that's already so foreign to us, that was not designed with us in mind. So my message for our youth is, you know, don't get discouraged. Don't get discouraged when you run into the people that have forgotten where they came from, because sometimes it could be people of color that we run into, you know, and unfortunately.
We're going to have to talk about that in a second, because, you know, I want to delve deeper into that. You talk about cultural identity and being proud of it, and also those that maybe not be as proud of it or what the
Yeah,
journey there is.
they've forgotten the way, and sometimes they make our journeys harder instead of easier. So my message is, keep looking, find somebody else. For every person that tells you can't do something, that makes you doubt yourself, there will be others that, yeah, maybe I can't do it, but they're willing to help. They're willing to listen, and they're willing to help you. They're looking at you and seeing your potential, and they're willing to be a part of that journey.
So, am I mistaken, or you're still working on getting your PhD? Is that correct?
Yes, I'm trying to get my doctorate. It's my EDD.
EDD, fair enough.
Because I don't know if I could do 6 years. I also want to spend time with my children, right?
That's important. Yeah, that's absolutely part of the equation. Yeah.
I should be done in May next year. Fingers crossed. And I'm focusing on stories. Surprise, surprise. So I'm going to do a narrative analysis on Chicana first-generation student stories, because our stories are important, especially in white-serving institutions, right? We need to get our story out there, and in hopes, of course, of finding those services or modifying those services to feed our needs. So
the power of narrative is so important, and we talk about that a lot in our organization. We talk a lot about being able to be comfortable with sharing your story, both the good and the bad, because every single part of that story ultimately builds into who you are and how you show up in life. And so it's interesting to me. I love this. Like, what do you love about the power of storytelling?
I think because a lot of times we're waiting to be perfect to do something, and we're never going to be perfect. We just need to let go of that right now. We just need to start now where we are, find the people that are willing to help us along the way, and, keep trying. I have embraced not knowing. I have stopped apologizing for being human and making mistakes, right? And because I realized that that's the only way that I'm going to learn. That's the only way I'm going to go forward. And actually, we might be doing more damage than good if we're sending the message to our students that they have to wait to reach this fake level of perfection before they try to do something.
I hear you. I celebrate that, and I always, everybody, who follows us here, like, I always talk about Tema Okun's white supremacist culture or characteristics of white supremacist culture, and perfectionism is a character trait of white supremacist culture. And so I think about like how that intersects, how we assimilate, or we try to assimilate, or we are made to assimilate, depending on where you are in your narrative, into adapting these norms that aren't necessarily our own cultural norms, right? And so this idea of perfectionism, throwing that out that way, and embracing where we are at the moment, how we show up at the moment, and understanding that growth is absolutely attainable and will happen. Just a couple more comments here from our community. Delia says, preach. You are inspiring a lot of people today, Graciela. So again, grateful that you're here with us today. I'm Abogada Jessica Piedra. What's up, Abogada Jessica Piedra? Hola. I get excited, so I start speaking really fast. Diana Munoz, love that you are bringing in the Chicano voice and teaching about our culture. Thank you. And then, of course, Jessica says, do the good that you can do. Absolutely. Talk to me a little bit about, so you are serving first generation students at Washburn, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. All my first generation students, hopefully they're watching.
Obviously we're in the middle of a global pandemic. This is impacting schools, districts, higher ed institutions like the one that you work at. What are your concerns for your first generation students during this time?
Just that they will stop reaching out. So a big part of my job, I feel like I have to talk like before COVID, after COVID, right? Because everything's changed, was just being there for them. Whether I worked so hard to make my space somewhere where they could just come and literally grab a granola bar and sit down and talk about their day. Because that is another thing that I've noticed. We have to never underestimate the power of the everyday interactions we have with our students. That is still building relationships. Having somebody stop by, ask them about their day, that is going to make it so that whenever they do have a bigger problem, they feel like it's a safe space. They feel like they can approach you and come and talk to you. So I have been trying to get more creative on continuing to build those relationships and continuing those conversations. I'm not going to say I have all the answers, but I'm going to keep trying. And a lot of times that's all we can do. So, I've been trying to check with them through email and maybe adding a little video, because now I also have 120 new first generation students that don't even know me, that I want them to be able to put a face to the name and recognize me as somebody that is there to help them. If I don't know the answer, I will find out who does. That is literally in my video, because I want to show them that it's okay to ask questions, that it's okay to not know. One of the biggest things in my position that I find that I have to keep fighting is deficit perspectives towards our students. And it's not just first generation. I think that is the biggest challenge our students face. Letting them know there is nothing wrong with us. Our parents did not go to college. That is it. We are capable. We deserve to be here. We can do this, So what I worried about is that having students, because of the pandemic, because maybe the lack of access to internet or computers, which we have been trying to call and reach out to make sure they have that access, stop reaching out, because then I don't know how to help them, if they stop that communication. And, how I help them depends on what they need. So that's another big thing about getting to know your students, the importance of knowing your student, their story, and how you can better serve them,
So you also brought up a really good point around this deficit mindset around students, particularly first generation students, and particularly around Latinx students and Black and Brown students in general, right? So being a Latina in higher ed, about to get your EDD, which is a small percentage of first of all, small percentage of Latinas and Latinos in general have a graduate degree or a post-grad degree like that. How do you fight the system in the professional environments that you've been in to change that narrative and to help others see the light differently around our community and our students?
I keep going back to our stories. So I keep going back to, yes, there is a place for numbers and there is a place for statistics, but we need to humanize those numbers. Right? We're not just half the campus. We have our stories and we have our challenges, and we also are like the experts in our journey. So just because something worked for somebody 10 years ago, that doesn't mean that is the space we are in now. And rather than seeing, because I've been asked, how do you make them be college students? Well, they're already college students, right? We just need to see where they are and how we can better serve them. So, because we keep talking about recruitment and retention, right? But sometimes we focus it on the student and what they're lacking and what they need to do. Well, what do we need to do as institutions? What do we need to do as educators to make them feel welcome and to keep them here? And one of my biggest fears is losing the faith of my students. So I try very hard to talk the talk and walk the walk, because they are watching and they know if you're just, saying the right things but not doing the right things. So I have been trying very hard to, live up to the what my students think I am, right? Expectations.
That is so real, and I appreciate the fact that you're talking about recruitment versus retention and whose burden is on. I think a lot about particularly from the Latinx community, the data, but I think from a teacher perspective, from an educator perspective, we see that our community shows up in the highest rates at these opportunities, and then they also exit the field at the highest rates. And it's not because, the data would demonstrate that it's not because, it's some deficit that's internal to Latinx teachers, but it's really about the overall environment and educational kind of the institutions that they're a part of. And so I tend to believe that we spend a lot more money on recruitment when we really should focus on retention and building the culture and the communities that are going to be able to retain our educators. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. And I still can't believe that we're expected not to work while student teaching. I think that is probably a huge factor why more of us don't come into this field, because that was a hard semester where actually I got through it teaching Chinese children English online, like at 3 a.m, So, having to juggle those different things. And I think, again, it goes back to knowing your students, knowing your population. We keep talking about recruiting people of color. Well, what are the situations that are keeping them from going into our field? And how can we help ease that burden? Instead of just saying, oh, we are on an open campus, we want diverse people, representation matters. Well, okay, let's look around. Let's look around our classes. Let's look around our institutions. Does it really matter? Because we're saying it, but we're not seeing it.
You are speaking my language today. This is good for the soul. Marta, good to see you, Marta. A retention and mentorship, por favor. Absolutely. Part of representation too is the ability to connect with folks like yourself. So I often think about how do we build those relationships between young educators and folks who have been in the field for a while, and how do we make sure that they feel like they're part of a larger community and not just isolated in their own building. How has mentorship benefited you?
So that is another thing I was thinking about, is I was getting find your tribe kind of thing, right? Find the people, like you said, that will feed your soul, the people that you can go and talk to and have those really honest conversations, and that you feel will listen and will give you feedback. If something happened and you're like, help me see this the right way. Did I interpret this the right way, or what is going on? So really, like what you're doing right now is amazing, because like you said, it's bringing us together. Even though we are apart, we know that somewhere in California, in Kansas City, somewhere, there's another educator that has this vision, that has this fire inside them that says, okay, this is not right. And we have somebody to reach out to.
I love it. You're hearing my partner have a good time over there. She's on a work meeting. So FYI, if you hear her interject, this is COVID-19. And so we learn how to work together in the Palacios co-working space. So we actually, I want to pivot just a little bit, because you also talked about people of color, particularly folks from our community, who sometimes stand in your way of moving forward. So I have my own experiences with that. I sometimes feel sad about that. I sometimes am depressed because of it. But also, how have you navigated that? Like, when do you see that happen, and how have you been able to push forward?
I think it goes back to finding those people that you can be honest with, that you can talk about things, and that you can kind of fact check stuff. Like, okay, this is what this person told me, but this doesn't really seem right. Is this really how it works? And then also finding allies too that will help you, that maybe are not part of our community, that will help you navigate those situations. It is really sad, right? Because you see a person of color, you get excited. You're like, yay, I found my person. This is my mentor. This is somebody I can trust that's going to help me because they've been on the same boat. But for whatever reason, something happened in their career and that is not the case. So we move on, right? We wish them well and we move on doing the work that our students need, because we can't stop. Right? Stopping is not an option. That I keep telling my boss, and my reasons to get up in the morning have first names and last names. So stopping is not an option. We have to keep going.
That is such a good centering place of the work can't stop because others want it to. And our community is too important for us to stop putting our effort and our intention behind it. And so this is healing for me today, so I appreciate you sharing this and being in this space again. For folks that are watching us, obviously we have a very lively and spirited conversation. Feel free to chime in with your thoughts and your ideas. We love to hear from you as always, and Graciela is open to answering any questions.
I really am. So
any questions. So let me ask you this. I'll go back to the narrative storytelling, like this important, the idea around owning your story, being able to share it with folks. Um, how, before, let's go back to the creation story of you, right? So, was there ever a time where you were uncomfortable with sharing your story?
Oh yeah, and I'm an ugly crier, so you can imagine the fear of sharing my story. I am an ugly crier, so I will try not to beep and not to cry today. So yeah, it was really hard because I actually took a break. So I tell my students I did everything backwards. Don't be like me. I got married, I had kids, I got divorced, and then I went back to school. So I took a 2-year break. Now that part of my story, although it's not ideal, right? We want our students to go to school and finish in the 4 years so that they can have that diploma and earn what you can earn with a college degree. But that part of my story is also helpful because I tell them, you know what? Sometimes we take the scenic route. It took me 10 years to come back. You can always come back. If for whatever reason it doesn't work out, I understand, but keep my number and find me and we'll get you right back in. So just finding all those different parts of your story that can hopefully help somebody else when they're going through those struggles of, maybe college is not for me, or I don't know what I'm doing, or, maybe this isn't the direction I could go. Just making it empowering instead of something to be shameful about and something that you try to hide, just bringing it out to the light and having a discussion about it. I think that students appreciate honesty and they appreciate vulnerability and being real with them when you're talking to them.
No, I think we were just talking about this on Monday night, which one of the key qualities of leadership or authentic leadership is being vulnerable and being able to share not just the good and like all the successes and all the wins, but also being able to share about the losses and the lessons learned and like the different actions that you may take from those moments. I'm reminded by something a mentor of mine once said, which sticks with me right now in this moment. Sometimes it's important for you to choose a narrative that best serves you. As I say that, what does that mean to you? Like, I'd love to see how you interpret that.
I think make your own narrative. Why are we trying to fit in a box? That's what we're fighting, right? The idea that this is the right way to go. Yeah, the goal is graduating, but it might look different for different students depending on what their journey is. And that's kind of what we're there to help them along the way. That's why I value so much building those relationships, because those relationships are going to show me how I can better serve my students.
I love that. Write your own narrative, write your own story. And I think we all too acknowledge that life gets messy, right? At the end of the day, if you're living life well, probably going to have a messy life.
Your autobiography is going to be so interesting, right?
I'm also thinking about like, man, what did I just hear? I saw Hamilton, although there's a lot of discussion around Hamilton and like storytelling, right? Like what perceptions of Hamilton were told and what were kind of dismissed. And so narrative is a part of that too. But something that really sticks with me from that musical, I guess, is like, who tells your story? And so, I'm interested in like your perspective on that. Like, how do you tell your story consistently and continuously? And how do you, as you're writing your narrative, some people would say like some people like try to misconstrue that narrative, right? You have some people out there that are looking at your story and they're going to tell a version of it that may not align with your story. So how do you navigate that?
I don't worry about the haters, right? Just keep moving. They're always going to be there. They're your biggest fans. Just keep going forward and then focus on what gets you up every day, right? What sets your soul on fire, which for me is working with my students, trying to help them navigate this academic journey, trying to make those community connections so that I can better serve them. So that's the other thing that I've come to learn is that it goes way past beyond the class. It goes beyond the classroom, right? I have students that don't have food right now. Okay, who do I call to connect them with that? I have students that are afraid of getting evicted. So you just never know where your journey is going to take you, and just be open to trying to do the best work that you can. Don't wait until you're perfect. Go find people that are going to help you meet the needs of your students, in my case, or reach your goals in the case of other people.
Have you thought about motivational speaking?
I maybe.
Just kind of suggest it as you continue to write your narrative. I think a nice little chapter in your autobiography will be that one chapter of like when you become a phenomenal like motivational speaker. Right there. So just gonna throw that out there.
But I want everybody to know there was a lot of mistakes behind every single lesson. So a lot.
You know, yes, and you know that's part of learning, right? I think that is what I'm not too worried so much about the mistakes, but really about from the lessons that you can take away and how you build from those lessons. Our community, just bringing that back into the conversation, Marta, sometimes teachers of color and students of color learn to assimilate to the environment to access some sort of success. Absolutely. One thing that I think about that, though, is we often think about the benefits that assimilation may have for students or for our community, but I always like to push back on that with saying, like, what are the costs? What are the social emotional costs of assimilation? What do we lose to give up what others have deemed success for us versus what we deem success for ourselves?
So in my doctoral program, we're in a cohort, and we always talk about this, like the hidden price of getting an education, like the things that this doctorate is costing us, like you said, that are social emotional, those connections, those, you know, losing touch about kind of where you were. And, you know, how can we hopefully recover that once we have reached this goal? Because, you know, we're all doing it in hopes of being able to go into those spaces where decisions are being made, where we will be able to impact the lives of our students and make policy changes that will benefit them and that will change our education system. So really, it's a very hard decision, right? Because we want to do good, but at what cost, and will we be able to get it back? I always joke that whoever is left after my doctorate, I know really do love me for sure, because I've missed so many things, and I've apologized so many times for, I'm sorry I have a paper, I'm sorry I have to do this, or just, you know, the stress level. I joke that it's like juggling bowling balls on fire, because, you know, I work full-time, I go to school full-time, I'm a single mom. So sometimes it just gets to be too much. And especially because of the times we're living in right now, I feel the obligation as a human to try to do something for my community as well. Because how can we not try to help, you know, our students that are fighting for their rights to get an education? How can we not help our Black colleagues and students and friends? Like we have to. We cannot stop working. There's too much of a price to pay.
Yeah, I mean, whew, I got the energy. I feel the flow right now. So that's where I'm at right now. Lori says, don't worry about the haters. Preach it. You said, don't worry about the haters. They're your biggest fans. If you don't need to hear that message today, then you're probably in a good place. Marta says community connection is key for educators. Absolutely. And Lori agrees with that. Yes, connecting to our students to their and our community is key. There we go. Yes, from Marta. How can we not? Wow, absolutely. It is a must. It is a passion. It is part of who we are if we're doing this work. And then Jessica says, tell it, that was my life in law school.
Yeah. And so here's another thing. Find those allies that are going to help you lighten the load, right? And Jessica is a huge ally. You know, that's why I send my students, because she went to law school. I didn't. So especially for our DACA students and families, I tried to send them in that direction. So that is another thing that we need to remember. We don't have to become those social service agencies for our students. There's already such great organizations like Harvesters, like, you know, the YWCA and all these other places that can do that. We just need to go out there and make those connections so that we can better serve our students by leading them that way.
But that sometimes feels like additional work, doesn't it? Because I hear from a lot of educators that, you know what, like I have to do this. I'm in the classroom 8, 9 hours, 10 hours a day. I have to do all these other additional things within the classroom. I actually don't have time to then go and build out these community relationships. How do you, as you navigate with young educators and young folks like that, how do you receive that criticism, and then how do you mold?
So in my institution, if anybody feels that way, I'll just be like, okay, send them my way. I'll be happy to do that. I understand, but it really comes from getting to know your students, building those relationships, because right now we're calling students to see what they need, to see if they're all set to be successful in the fall. And I can't just be like, hi, how are you doing? Oh, well, I don't know if I'm going to eat today, and I don't know if I'm going to get evicted. And I can't just be like, okay, bye. I want to be able to leave them on a high note and give them, a little bit of hope during these difficult times. Because, I try to be very optimistic, but chances are our students' needs are only going to increase the longer that we are in this. So, just getting them connected, making a guide. It's so easy. It's also like making a guide for them. And then if teachers don't feel comfortable, looking through and connecting the students to those needs, sharing that guide with your students and families so that they can reach out to the community and finding those key people that are okay and feel comfortable with going that extra mile for them.
So as you start achieving your EDD, as you become Dr. Berumen, what do you hope to accomplish in the very near future?
I hope to be able to help more and more of our youth get an education, so that then we can keep on building. Not that there's not fantastic people already doing it, but I realize that it's going to take all of us. It's going to take more people trying to work for this goal. And so we can create those pipelines that we keep talking about that we need, in a lot of the conversations, because if I can't log on, I've tried to watch them after. We talk about, we look around, and there's not enough people that look like us, that can connect with our students, that can connect with our families, so that they can truly impact and change our communities. So that is my hope, to empower others to keep doing the work, because it's not going to stop with us, Edgar. We are amazing people. We know a lot of amazing people, but we need more people.
And to that point, like, it takes every single one of us in each of our roles and our positions and what we're doing to help advance this work. And we are all critical components to that, right? That to me is why I think a lot about retention in within our own community and in the space. Because the reality is, like, if we can't keep the educators that currently exist, that are effective, that are doing the work, that understand these issues, that continue to better themselves in these spaces, and they exit because systemic issues, policies, salary, like not being appreciated, not being loved on, whatever it is, name the myriad reasons of why educators actually leave the profession. I think it's so important that you said it, like there is not enough of us doing the work, but my push to some folks on that is there are some of us doing this work. And I think some of the narratives that I hear, and I don't, maybe you'll agree or disagree on this, is like, can't find them. Can't find them. Don't know where to go. Don't know where to start. Like, I have all these sayings, and so for me, it's like it's so important that these spaces are continuously held, because we are here.
Right. And when I talk about creating more leaders or empowering more leaders, like we don't all have to start our own, right? Because like you said, there's already people doing great work, but we can connect with those people and start building on that, because otherwise what happens, our organizations that we work so hard to build die off, right? So we need to continue building them and bringing more people to continue the work.
I'm gonna bring Martin. Martin, what's up, man? How are you doing? Good to see you. That was one of my motivations when I got my EDD. Absolutely. Marta, she says, working on my own PhD, I sometimes wonder if this is me trying my voice to sound more accepted by the mainstream of educational community, a question of access. I'm going to push back on that, Marta, because I believe that, here's what I'll say about that. and I'll use my words carefully here because I think it's so important to bring in our perspectives into these spaces and to norm for our perspectives versus, to bring in and say like, you know what, I know what I'm talking about because I've done my research. And also I believe in our community and I believe in community-based approaches. I believe in talking about narratives. I believe about sharing and elevating, not just the data and in the quantitative perspective of this, but also the qualitative side of this. Like, this is also critical to the work that we're doing. And so I'm hoping that by the more PhDs and EDDs and all type of advanced degrees and just degrees in general and just moving through the academic system, like that we're also influencing the stories that censor us versus like make us, the other. So.
Yeah, and I think we all have those doubts going in, and I did actually ask some colleagues of color if it was worth it, because it is a lot of work. And they said, unfortunately in certain spaces those letters get me the credibility I need to be able to speak our truth. So like Edgar said, sometimes that's our ticket into those spaces where we can hopefully truly impact the communities that we're in.
Yeah, and I think, ultimately something that you tie back to is understanding your story, understanding where you come from, understanding your roots and your motivations and your why, and being really reflective on that while you're in these spaces allows you to navigate them in a different way. And I think it allows you to compromise less of yourself than you otherwise would. I could be right. I don't think that there is like a right way to do it, right? I don't think that we navigate this 100% one way or the other. But I think that the more comfortable you are with who you are, the better you're able to navigate these spaces and the better you're able to understand like what you're able to negotiate on and what you don't need to negotiate on.
Yes. Very good. Very well said.
Well, I could be wrong. You're the expert here. So,
well, and if you think about it, we're trying to change the systems, right? So this is the perfect time to bring up these questions, to bring up our voices, our experiences, and help change the systems that we're in.
So what do you see as exciting in the future for your students? What do you think so obviously we know a lot of the challenges that COVID-19 has brought to our community, but what do you also see as some of the opportunities that this time has brought to our community?
Just, I'm excited to see my students see themselves as agents of change in their community. So they have gone from feeling like they need to look for answers and they're not sure, to seeing them become these leaders of the future that are going to continue doing the work and just truly to become outspoken and to help them find those organizations that are going to teach them how to organize themselves, because this is going to be for the long run, right? This is not just a moment, it's a movement. So we need to help them be successful, help them see themselves as leader, help them get the training that they need, and then help them as they move forward. So to me, that is really exciting because I see the change coming, and I see that we have the ability to empower others to do the work. And they have taught me so much in terms of sometimes you help people by stepping to the side, right? You're still supporting them. You're still following them along the way and encouraging them, but you give them the spotlight too, so that they can also feel that empowerment and that change that they've made.
I think what you just said there is something that I think people who want to be allies and try to be allies in spaces often miss, which is at some point you have to step out of the way. And if you've helped elevate the voice, or if you've helped censor the voice of the person you're trying to support, like at some point you can also just step out of the way and be there as support, right? And so I don't know. I think that that's one of those things that we miss often, and just in general.
I think so too, and in leadership, a lot of times, delegating is one of the hardest things, and so I that's what I've come to love about working with my students is they teach me how much I don't know, and they keep me current because I'm like, I've never thought about that. I need to go to a workshop, or I need to go to training, and I need to find out about more because maybe I had never considered it. So yeah, just going through that with them in this journey and learning with them and giving them that spotlight for them to move on.
So as we near the end of our conversation, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions around how can our community best support you? You know, if you had one or two things that we can do to help support you and provide you love and support, what would that be?
My students have given me hope for the future. We have so many hardworking, dedicated, intelligent youth that want to get an education, that want to move forward, that want to serve their community. So they're always asking for scholarships. There's always asking for help, for organizations, support. You know, I'm trying to help them build their network as well. I have students that are going into law. I'm not a lawyer. So, you know, finding those mentorship opportunities for them, for doctors, you know, I feel like the more we can all come together, the more like that maybe I don't know the person, but you know the person that I can connect my student with. So just really coming together as professionals to move our youth forward so that they can then become the leaders that we can follow along as we move forward.
That's so important. The power of network and the power of sharing our resources and providing access when others may not have it. So you know that, hopefully you know, and if not, let's make it clear here that, you know, we're absolutely happy to help support any of your students in connecting to the incredible network that we currently have. And I know that anybody who's watched us today, who's watching us right now, will also be in favor of that, because I absolutely believe that of our community. Marta says, I love your genuine respect for your students. You really elevate their stories. Yeah, it's pretty powerful to see you in action and to see you. I believe that you're in like the right place. And I'm a little jealous of your students. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I wish I had somebody who was excited about my future when I was going through, you know, college. I'll say that.
Yeah.
I'm sure somebody was. I was absolutely excited about my future. How, you know, from an educator perspective, as a teacher, we work with some aspiring educators out here, people who are in their first or second year of teaching. What are some words of wisdom or advice that you would give them so they can continue on in their journey and pass like that 3-year hump in the field?
We need you. Don't give up. Your students need you. The students that you haven't even met yet need you, because they're going to look at you and they're going to see all the spaces that they can be a part of without knowing. Because again, we can say until our face is blue, like, oh, we're diverse, we're inclusive. But if you're not seeing yourself represented in those positions, you know, so just, you know, in those moments of when you're burnt out, when you're tired, when you're crying, when you want to give up, just think of all those students that are going to look up to you, and just by you completing your dreams, that you're also, you know, supporting along the way. You know, I actually have had this conversation with somebody that was considering getting their master's and continuing forward, and I'm like, do it. I know it's a lot of work, but I can tell you right now, you are going to impact so many lives, and we can't not to, right?
if that's not the rallying call for us for the remainder of the year, it's like we cannot to. Right. You know, something you also said that I just want to reinforce, and I think it's so important to kind of repeat, is like the students who haven't even met you yet need you.
Yes.
And you know, I think about the stories that I see teachers tell. Not like so first year teachers, second year teachers, they're navigating like the practice of it. They're learning how to do certain things. They're under all these other issues that come along with being a first and second year teacher. And they sometimes don't see the impact that they have right away, right? It's only until sometimes maybe 5, 10, 15 years later, whereas when a student comes up and says, hey, you were really meaningful to me. Like, you created the space that I needed to be in, and you made me feel safe, or whatever that may be. And so sometimes it feels like the reward isn't right there, you know, like it's like, I genuinely believe that there are plenty of students who have been impacted by the teachers that we serve. that if they haven't already said how a value or the teachers were, like, talk about that and censor that. Before we leave, go ahead.
Oh, I was just thinking, men too. We need so many men in our profession as well. So I was talking with my son, and for the first time, he's a freshman in high school. It's the first time he's ever had a Black coach, ever. He had never had a teacher of color. And I don't even think I did until I was in college. And then looking back, they were international teachers. They weren't even, really American. So yeah, if you need another reminder why, you're so important in this profession.
So I'm hearing a couple of great call to actions. We need more men in education, particularly men of color. We need more teachers that look like us in general. We need to stick in the field because it's important that the students that don't even know us yet, they know that they need us. You're like destined for this work. I love it. I love it. You're living a purpose, and I always enjoy talking to somebody who is.
My students hit me up every morning, and like I tell you, if you need help for the future, talk to young people.
One final question for you as we wrap up. In terms of maintaining your energy and your love for this work, something that I've been thinking a lot about is, like, clearly self-care, and being and taking time for yourself to rejuvenate and to re-energize. How do you recommend that our teachers today, during this moment in time, that they take care of themselves? Because I think there's a lot of things happening right now. We don't know what schools are going to do. We don't know what the job status is going to look like. We don't know if we want to do virtual instruction or not. And so a lot of stress, a lot of tension, a lot of that energy in that. So how do you recommend that teachers take a little bit of time for themselves so they can be present for their students when the time comes?
And this one's a really hard question because, like you said, there's so much. We're trying to prepare for a school year that we don't even know what it looks like. I feel like daily things can change depending on the numbers, right? We can't force people to wear masks. We can't force our friends to isolate after going on vacation. You know who you are. I'm kidding. I'm not going to call anybody out. But, we can control, like you said, trying to prepare. Currently, we're planning on being face-to-face, but we're also preparing to be online. And then just really setting that time apart for yourself, even if it means, so I have chickens. I've become this crazy chicken lady. I love going out there and watching my chickens. Right now we have baby chicks. So I sit in the hammock and just watch them, So finding those quiet moments where you can just shut off the computer, shut off the phone, and then just really, just embrace being out in nature, getting some fresh air or whatever it looks like. But yes, like you said, we need to take that time for ourselves because we don't know what's coming. And our students need us in whatever shape or form that's coming. They're going to look to us. So please take care of yourself.
Marta reminds us that we also need Latinx administrators. Absolutely. And yes, we at all at this moment, we need representation. Graciela, thank you so much for taking the time today to share your infectious energy with us. I absolutely it's such a pleasure to always talk to somebody who's so passionate about the work and passionate about the students and is a ride or die for their students as well. And so thank you for taking the time to share a little bit with us today.
Thank you so much, and I will see you again.
Absolutely. And LEC community, thanks so much for joining us for another edition of LEC Live. You find us here on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 4 o'clock talking to phenomenal educators who happen to be Latinx. And just thank you so much for your support throughout the last couple of weeks and last couple of months. I hope to see you again soon. Have a great rest of your day.